In this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial, we're going to learn how to make video clips and how to animate objects. In order to do this, we need two things. We need a camera and we need a level, let's see what it's called, level sequence, which is basically the sequence where all our animations and our camera movements will be taking place. Before I start, I realized here that my folder structure is all over the place and my namings here are very messy. So before I do anything, I'm going to put these cameras in a folder. So I'm calling it still, because all these cameras that we set up for the previous tutorials were all set up to make still images. And I'm gonna make some new cameras later on. But the first thing that we need is a level sequence. So we will reach that in a few different places as usual in Unreal Engine, but you see this little movie clip image up here. If we click there, we can add a level sequence. If we click there, it will ask us to save it somewhere. And we should have a folder called cinematics. So we right click for a new folder. We call it cinematics, where we'll keep all of these kind of things. And we call it something. So we call it video 01 test, for instance. Always good to have incremental names. And it will open up a new panel at the bottom here, which has a timeline. You can see you can slide around. It has an empty list on the left hand side and a bunch of buttons. So we can first maybe try to animate something before we go into the camera, just to see how this works. So let's bring in something simple like a basic object, like a sphere. So let's say we want this to move around from left to right, for instance. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. If we find where we want it to start, so at 0, 0 perhaps, and we know where we want it to be, we can either click S, S on our keyboard, and if we do that, a keyframe has been added. You see now it says sphere 04, which is the name of the sphere. Messy because we have many other spheres in there, but we're going to delete this in a second. It's just to demonstrate how it works. And then we can move to somewhere else in the timeline and move the object and click S again. And now we see you have two keyframes, and we can go back and forth and see this object moving around. And if you click space on your keyboard, it will play the animation like that. And we can also add keyframes in other ways. So let's say we also want to scale it. So from here to here, we want to scale it. So we can now go in underneath here where the transform has been added, and we can see scale. And we can go and directly add numbers here. So we can go and click, maybe you want it to scale like that here. And if you do that, it will automatically add a keyframe. And let's say here we want it to be 4. And then we want it here to be back to 1. You can see the keyframes are there. And if we click play now, or spacebar, you can see that deformation happening. There's a couple of other ways that, by the way, before we continue with the animation here, that we can get an overview over these cinematic tools, and we can go under perspective here and go down to cinematic viewport, and we'll get play buttons and record buttons and all sorts of things. This we will not be using now, but when you really get into making a film, it's nice to have this. I'm going to hide it now because I'll go back to the default viewport, because it's just easier. We have a bigger view. So now these keyframes, we can move them around also, and we can change these settings by moving these around, and we can go in and type in new values if we want and change it into whatever we want. And there's other ways that we can add keyframes, and that is by going to the detail panel and look for something that has this icon here. So you see add keyframe to the property. So this little diamond shape. So we can then also, let's say here we want it actually to be 0, or sorry, 1. So we want it to not have deformed yet. So we see where we are in the timeline. And if you click add a keyframe to the property, then it would have added a keyframe. So whenever you see an icon like that, you can animate it. So you can see you can animate the static mesh, you can animate the material, physics, we can animate all sorts of things. So you can either look for this tool to create keyframes, or you can click S on your keyboard, or you can use the settings once it's in the sequencer here to change the properties. All right, so I don't want this in my film. Actually, it was just to demonstrate. So I can now go and delete this, which will not delete the object. It will just delete the animations. So if I click delete, it will go back to being just an object in my scene. And in fact, I don't want it at all. So I'm going to click delete fully. By the way, you will see here this little icon in here. If I click on it and I click F to zoom in, you see that this is my level sequencer that I just added. It has this little clip button. It's called video 01 test, and this can be anywhere in the scene. Again, if you don't want to see it, you can click G on your keyboard to hide all of those kind of icons, but it's useful just to show, because sometimes maybe you close this and you go like, hey, where's my film that I'm working on? We can then go in my outliner. Let's say you haven't yet put it in a correct place. Hopefully you remember what it's called, but we can search for it then. So video, and you see the little icon there. By the way, we also see this little asterisk here, which outlines that it hasn't been saved yet. We should be saving regularly. So I'll just do that right now. Save all, and that asterisk is deleted or removed. So you can click on it and then go to open level sequence, and it will open up the animation here. And you will see now also that there is an animated bit in here, and it's the position of this icon here. Somehow I managed to click S or something like this to animate this. We don't need this to be animated, so I can go ahead and delete this. All right, so now we have nothing in our sequence, and now we want to put in a camera to actually make a camera see something and maybe make it move. So we do that in the same way that we've done it before. Before I do that, I'm just going to make a new folder, call it cinematics, where I'm also going to put my cameras. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new camera, a cinecamera actor, pull it in, put it here. And let's say we want to fly down some of these arches that we created in the previous tutorial. Like that maybe. Or through this one perhaps. All right, then we're going to pull this one into the cinematics, and we're going to rename it, because we're going to need to call it video 1. We're going to need to have to find it in here. So if we want to start to animate its location, again, we can do it by clicking S on our keyboard once it's selected, and it will add the camera to the sequencer down here, and it will also add something called camera cuts. Basically, camera cuts, this is the final layer in which we will see the final video. So this means also we're not going to look at this in this tutorial, but we can have several cameras and add several cuts. So you can export from Unreal Engine maybe 5 different camera angles using 5 different cameras, let's say. And the reason why it popped up like this, because you see this little blue icon here under the camera that we just created. It means that we are piloting this camera. We're seeing from this point of view. You can unclick this and go back to the general view. We can click that again to see that view, or we can click in the camera cuts to see what the final pass will be. In this case, we're just going to use one camera, so it doesn't matter which one we're looking at. There are other ways to add the camera. We can add objects by clicking down here, and you will see the cameras here. We won't see this camera because it's already added, but you can go ahead and add any object you want that you might want to change here. And if you know the name, you can search for it here as well. Okay, so the moving around of a camera is exactly the same way that we move around any other object. So let's say this is our starting point, straight down the middle here. And we can push S on our keyboard then to add a keyframe. And then let's say at the end here we wanted to have traveled down almost all of this. We click S again, and we can then go back and see that our camera is moving. And then we can click the spacebar to start playing. And you will see that the camera is moving very fast, way too fast. So then we can either change this value here. We click on this keyframe and say, okay, let's say we actually move a little bit less. Then we can click S again, and we can see now it's moving a bit slower. But perhaps we actually do want to move all the way down there where we were. And we want the camera to move slower, which means that we need more time. You can see that our timeline has a beginning and an end, because in this view here, we have the don't know what to call this, but the cursor that shows which frame we're looking at currently. We have these green and red markers, which shows which section we want to render. And then we have down here this viewer that will allow us to zoom in into specific frames. And you can see that this is zoomed out completely. Our timeline is no longer, it's not longer than this. So we can go ahead and extend the timeline, which we do with these numbers down here. You can see that now we have 165 frames. So let's say we type in 500 frames. Now we can zoom out, and we can see now that we can move these keyframes by doing that. And we click now, we see that the camera is moving much slower, which is better. But now it will stop playing here, and we want to continue. So we can grab this little red thing here and pull it down so that all the keyframes are visible. And you will see that the camera cuts doesn't move, so we also need to drag that down so that it's fully visible within the area that we want to render. Click on our camera again to see the viewport, and by default the sequencer is showing the timeline in frames, which is not so intuitive, and let's say what you prefer, but I prefer to see it in seconds instead. By default this is also set to 30 frames per second, so you can calculate how many seconds 500 frames is. But you can also go here under this viewport and change to show time as seconds. So now instead you're seeing this as seconds, which is maybe easier. All right. And then we're not going to be going through all of the different settings that you can change with the camera, but we, from the previous tutorials, go back and look again and see how you can change the aspect ratio, the focus, etc. All of those things can also be animated, and you can see by default here some of these settings show up, like for instance the manual focus settings, which we can also animate. So you can see that here in the beginning of the scene, the main frame here, if we open it like this, is blurry. So we could go in and either change it manually here. So you see that I'm like changing the focus here. So you can do that. See now it seems to be in focus. And we can add a keyframe. And then you will see that as you move down, the main focus is on the frames that are close to the camera. And then we can move that to wherever we want. And then let's say here we want the focus to be further down. And you see it adds a keyframe automatically. And also remember that you can go into the camera to the focus settings and then use this eyedropper and click on something that you want to focus on. And if you want to keyframe it, make sure that you use the button here, the add keyframe to the property, or click S on your keyboard. So now you can see that the focus setting is changing slightly as we move down. And within the camera, you can basically animate almost any setting. We can also change and animate our lights. So if we go down to our main lighting, we click on the directional light. It's not here in the in our sequencer yet. We could add it like this and type in, what's it called? Directional light. We can add it like this by clicking there. Or we can simply click on it in the outliner and go down to the detail panel and see here that the intensity or the color, let's use the color, has one of those buttons. So if we click it, you see that it gets added here. And then let's say from here we want the white color light, and then from here we want blue lighting, and then we add another keyframe for the color, and then let's say here we want it white again. Then you can see that the color is changing. And you can use this for spotlights, you can use this for basically any object, any setting. And in the next video, we're going to look at how to actually export this video from Unreal Engine.